Okay, so in Kemira, in your recent research, I think the UK ranks third overall when it comes to European water resilience. I guess it'd just be good for you to give us an idea of how you'd assess the country's current water infrastructure in terms of reliability, sustainability, and maybe capacity, particularly with future challenges. Strengths and weaknesses, I suppose, is the summary of that question.
Yeah, UK ranked third in the list of the water resilience countries that we'd assessed. Norway, Sweden were above us. We were just ahead of Finland. So countries which have an abundance of water around them. So, we're in a good position there in terms of the ranking. Um, from an industry point of view, we also are in a good position. We draw 1.7% of fresh water for industrial use. So from those points of view, we're in a good position in that water resiliency. We know that 93% of the general public are really supporting sustainability activities. So the public perception is there. But we do have some challenges, of course. There is that perception, but when we look towards the resiliency on a household level, there are 14% of public have backup plans for emergency water, for example. So there's a difference between what's the reality and maybe some of that public perception. And this is where this Kemira Water Index really bridges the gap of looking towards those differences in perception and giving policymakers, utilities, businesses some real information to find opportunities to look towards improving some of those things. Certainly from the risks going forwards also, climate change events are increasing. We see that very, very stark observations of that. Urban growth is putting pressure on aging infrastructure. So there's scope here to improve some actions and really match what that public awareness is towards the reality.
Okay, and you said obviously and correctly that there's overall the industry is in pretty good health, but despite the strong investment, if you like, in the infrastructure, I think the index said that only 38% of your UK respondents believe that regional investment's adequate. I mean, can you think, is there a particular reason why that might be, and is there a way of how that perception might be changed?
Yeah, communication is a big key here. It's a really a communication effort. If I dare to say it, there is some probable general mistrust in utilities because of various scandals, headlines over the years. So that transparency, gaining the public engagement, gaining the public trust is a key communication effort from the water utilities. Educating consumers on how their investments are directly affecting the progress, affecting things like reducing leaks, enhancing that resilience is a key activity for the utilities, showcasing some of the successful investments and even using the surveys and the Kemira Water Index as an example is something that the utilities can find those opportunities to better communicate.
Okay, and another sort of interesting sort of stat to come out from the index was I think only 16% of respondents are concerned about PFAS. I guess that suggests probably the rest of them maybe don't even know what PFAS is. I don't know, but do you think regulators and all the water providers need to educate the public more about these emerging contaminants? Or do they sort of keep quiet about them because if they don't know about them, then they're not going to get criticized. But if you think they should be telling people about it, is there again a way that they can communicate that in a sort of a positive way as opposed to taking some more criticism, if you like?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head for a couple of things there. Education is critical here, for sure. We in the water industry talk about PFAS, it's something that we're aware of. General public hears PFAS, they don't know what it is. They hear forever chemicals. It makes some resonance. It starts to make a connection to their everyday lives as why these things are to be concerned about, why these things need to be reduced or removed or destroyed. So simplifying the jargon also is part of that education. Understanding where these contaminants, such as PFAS, may be accumulating, where there may be health impacts. Actually, I saw a couple of weeks ago on the BBC, there was an article about some UK water executives that had their waters tested for PFAS, and there was some shock and horror at how much levels there were in the water. So little campaigns like that even can help the awareness, can build up education to understand what we can do. And there are many, many technologies that are being investigated. Kemira ourselves are looking into many technologies for PFAS removal or PFAS destruction. So education also to the consumers of what mitigation efforts there are out there is also part of that education and part of that communication, because as you rightly said, some of the companies may think, let's keep this under the radar somewhat to not spark any further concerns. But when there are genuine technologies and advancements to address them, then that's all part of the solution and part of the ways to advance the knowledge and the perceptions.
Okay, and in terms of other sort of findings, I mean, there's obviously a lot of detail in the index, but one other thing I noticed, I think it's 40% of respondents believe that the rules around water quality need improvement. And I guess the question there would be, what role does government regulation monitoring play in terms of ensuring safe drinking water? I mean, I guess we both know that the drinking water is, there are very rarely sort of incidents, but why only 40%, or sorry, do you think 40% respondents think water quality needs improvement when it seems to be pretty good? But
yeah, again, if we look towards that ranking, UK is number 3 in water resilience. That includes also water quality, and we think towards why is that public perception different? Of course, again, mentioning there have been bad headlines such as sewage releases into watercourses. These kind of things stay in the minds of the general public, but the government must play a proactive role here. Of course, they can strengthen regulation, they can enforce compliance, but also there needs to be increasing transparency in those reportings of water qualities, with those enhanced monitoring, with public reporting mechanisms. It boosts confidence in the reality rather than the perception or what you see in the media headlines. So as long as those steps are integrated with other environmental policies and ensure that there's alignment with other climate goals, the government can have a better cohesive communication and policy strategy.
and I'm wondering as well, do you think the public in general understand, if you like, the whole water cycle, or if they see a headline, as say pollution in river, they somehow think that's going to end up coming into their taps, whereas obviously that's a sort of end of line problem. Do you think they understand the intricacies of the whole water cycle, or they just say see a headline and think the whole thing is quality is an issue, if you like?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think, as you said, it's very rare we really have interruptions to our drinking water supply. Very rare we have any aspects towards our community and municipal water. However, media and scandal headlines do affect that perception. And quite rightly, as you say, some of these activities, some of these events don't affect the quality of our drinking waters and our infrastructure. So the general public can be misled somewhat by the odd headline rather than the continuous good work that the water industry does.
And you mentioned, I think, at the start about this fairly, oh, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but only 40% of households saying they're prepared for water-related challenges. Are there any particular initiatives you think that can get people finally on side? Because I mean, I've been in the water industry for quite a long time. I expect you have, but I think was it 1995, the drought, and the world was going to end, and you could argue that 30 years later, not a lot has changed in terms of the way the public are looking after water or not, as the case may be. So just your thoughts as to any initiatives that can help get that message to households and the community in terms of what happens if they don't start adjusting behaviours and water use habits.
Yeah, maybe a controversial thing to say, but for me, I think water could be perceived as being too cheap. So the public are complacent about using it and overusing it, and pardon the pun, it's always on tap. So it's very rare that there are interruptions, and therefore you or the general public would be complacent about saving water. So I think what we say was it 92% claim to be practicing some conservation methods, yet 14% only have backup water. These things are maybe somewhat out of sync. Education, for sure, having water saving devices in the toilets, for example, having even just simply backup water, bottled water for 1 or 2 days in the house. In the rare event that something may happen, smart water technologies, smart meters can then help educate and can help monitor to reduce consumption. So there's more available in the system when there is an event that is disruptive. From a community point of view, I read something recently which was really quite a simple idea, but quite an effective one, that in New York, basketball courts have been built below ground. So then when there's floodwaters, they run into the basketball courts to capture that water, and it's not then affecting local communities, okay, in a small way. But then when the event is over, you can continue using the basketball court. So even smart, simple ideas like this can help communities, or can help give ideas to household on how to mitigate. Even having aluminium tape in the store cupboard, so you can seal up the doorways if there's a flood risk. Small things like this are maybe not very well understood or very well communicated, but can be very effective in an event of something really hard happening.
Okay, and you mentioned smart water meters there, and I think adoption in the UK is significantly lower compared to many other European countries. Is there a particular reason why that is? Are we just as a nation sort of resistant to the idea of people coming in and putting a meter in and telling us sort of how to use our water, or is there a way we can overcome any sort of resistance and encourage households to use the tool?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, okay, maybe there's dare I say, generational gaps and education gaps as well with smart meters. There's can be a skepticism, oh, it's something that's going to make us pay more of our bills, rather than the converse, which is if you are using them, you can save water, you can reduce consumption, and therefore they are for the good. Upfront costs maybe, lack of awareness, even concerns over the privacy. People are thinking Big Brother is watching us, but when you look at what the installations can do, they're monitoring, they're reducing consumption, they're alerting to issues. Yeah, further water efficient discounts can apply if you show lower consumption. Those things can accelerate adoption.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued as well because the on the energy side, it seems to, again, anecdotally, I don't have any sort of hard facts and figures, but it seems more people are accepting of smart energy meters, and as you say, that's because that helps them reduce their energy consumption. So logically, they should welcome something that helps them with their water consumption, but for some reason, they don't accept the water ones where they do the energy ones. It strikes me as slightly strange.
Mm.
Um, in terms of, I suppose, more general technologies, we've got AI. I can't have a conversation these days without mentioning AI. I think in business and digital water management's been around as an idea for a while. So, are there particular things that you can see, or maybe Kemira's doing as in terms of helping consumers and businesses just improve water resilience?
Yeah, you're right. Everywhere, AI, digitalisation is making an impact. Smart meters, as we just talked about, can monitor the water use and detect leaks early, And an example, I have some friends. They had a smart meter. They could see their consumption escalating, and they then investigated, found a faulty valve, and got it fixed. That then, number one, reduces the amount of water that's leaking, but secondly, to them, it was ensuring their bill was not sky high the following month. So there are real practical reasons why these are good things. From an AI predictive analytics point of view, then that's going to help the accuracy. It's going to help the forward prediction and the water management. Maybe like digital twinnings help then simulate and prepare for water events. So the digital systems are really allowing us to better plan and respond to crisis. We at Kemira here also, as well as our chemical solutions, are very strong on digitalisation and smart technologies to help companies, consumers manage their water usage in the most efficient ways. So from an industry point of view, public want transparency, they want innovation, even more intelligent use of water, such as closed loop systems, and managing the water in closed loop systems is much more sustainable than continued consumption.
And in terms of the sort of industrial water usage side, I think the survey, the index says there's strong public support for stricter regulations, conservation incentives for industry. So clearly that is something to bear in mind. But I do know, obviously, lots of industries, the energy industry, and I was having a conversation with someone about carbon capture technologies, I think need a lot of water, agriculture. So how do you balance the fact that certain industries need a lot of water against the sort of water resilience conservation imperative on the other side? Is it possible to sort of address both industries' needs and resilience equally well, if you like?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, our industry is in a good position. Only 1.7% of fresh water in water intake for industrial use. So starting with that public perception, reporting could be more visible. It could be more prominent to highlight these things, to really highlight that industry does a good job. And this is where also the Kemira Water Index really comes into its own and highlights those opportunities of communication, or highlights what industry is doing. As you mentioned, a large proportion, 72% of Brits are supporting mandatory water usage reporting. So policies can use that. They can promote closed loop water systems, for example, having incentives to use those to really enable water reuse rather than consumption, offering tax incentives for further use of that. And then, okay, we improve, of course, on top of a very good situation, but the general public and the perception and the awareness is stronger of that one as well.
Okay, and maybe just a couple more. I mean, we could probably have a separate conversation about this one question, but just give me a sort of précis in terms of, is the UK investing enough in water infrastructure to meet future demands? And I guess there's an element of staying competitive with other sort of nations. But just, yeah, do you think the AMP cycles and the investments, etc., are good enough, or is there potentially going to become a problem when it comes to water resilience?
Yeah. I said, we're very high in the rankings of water resilience already. As you mentioned, the AMP continues to push the regulations. It then continues to incentivize and force industry to continuously innovate, provide the right solutions for improving the drinking water qualities and the supply. Maybe there's further action that policymakers can work on, and improving the transparency of upgrading infrastructure, for example. So flood defences, leak detection, drought resilience. Those are things that general public can see, they can perceive, and when they see that, that will help help the perception, help the understanding that the industry is meeting the demands, is looking to the future, is improving the infrastructure and being competitive towards other nations.
And maybe just finally, as you say, they're number three, so there's, that's not a particular reason to beat ourselves up over that. It's a good place to be. But are there any lessons that we can learn from? I think you mentioned Norway and Sweden are numbers one and two. So anything that they do well or differently, and how easy would those things be to implement in the UK?
Yeah, Norway, Sweden, they have very good public-private collaborations. They have very good integrated water management and strong investment into the infrastructure. Here for the UK, with further public awareness, with accelerated infrastructure investment and adopting the smart technologies that we've talked about, for sure that will strengthen policy and public engagement will follow on from that, I have no doubt.
Okay, and maybe just finally, as I go, just Kemira, anything you can share as to what's on the company's roadmap? Obviously, heavily embedded in the water sector. What's going to be keeping you busy over the coming months? And obviously, we've got a new year coming up into 2026.
Yeah, we've talked about some of the things. Smart technologies is something we're working heavily on with new AI investments as well to help municipalities control and manage their water consumption and industries as well. PFAS, micropollutants, microcontaminants. We're working heavily on various technologies to help reduce and remove those micropollutants. And of course, the major water trends of scarcity and recycling, reuse. We are a global leader in sustainable chemical solutions. So where possible, we are investigating more and more renewable raw materials and sources for our products. So we are, yeah, very busy and we have many solutions and many more solutions to come through from our innovation process.
Excellent. I mean, it's been fantastic to chat, and thanks so much for sharing some great insights into the index and thoughts as to how things might be improved. Although, as I say, number three isn't a bad spot to be in to start with. So, David, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Phil. Thanks for having the time to speak to me as well. Thanks.